Good evening, everyone. I'm David Suddjian, and welcome to Bird Bomb's helpful burst of ID info. Our topic tonight is Autumn ID Challenges. This is episode 40 of Bird Bombs, and I'm happy to be joined tonight by Laura Stedman and Peter Ruprecht. They're going to be coming in a little bit later in our Let It Fly segment here in the presentation after just a little bit. Here we are, kind of in the heart of the autumn season, and it's a great time to be out birding in Colorado. And tonight we're going to focus on birds that are out on the water. So I picked three groups that I want to focus on that we can see out in our reservoirs and lakes. And some of them we get pretty excited about, like the scoters and loons. And the grebes that we're going to focus on tonight are a little more regular, if you will, but they're still fun and present some definite ID challenges. So we have two grebe species and three scoter species and four loon species to focus on and enjoy this evening as we learn a little bit more about identifying them at this autumn season, which is a prime time for these birds. So even before we go into it anew, I want to mention that I focused on all three of these groups on prior bird bombs. So I recommend going back in our video library, either on the DFO page or on DFO's YouTube channel, and you can view the videos of the bird bombs presentations on loons and the grebes under the title Ass Feet, and the Colorado sea ducks, which is our scoters and includes the long-tailed duck. So a little different take on those videos from tonight, but same species. I do recommend that. And there's a whole bunch of other good bird bombs that you might want to check out for the late fall season. Here's some of the titles here that I recommend taking a look at if you want to kind of prime the pump for birding during the fall season. It's probably a red tail, eyes on geese and swans, better duck, Get Gullible, and Raptors for Real. All those episodes would be worth checking out for your late fall birding. All right, so here we are. We're going to check out these three groups, as I mentioned, the grebes, focusing on just two. And these are in the family Podicipedidae, and we're just going to focus on the horned grebe and the eared grebe. Now, you'll notice in these images I put up some breeding plumaged individuals to oogle at a little bit, but we're not looking at birds looking like this during this time of year for the most part. And so just kind of a little teaser to have these pretty breeding plumage birds for you to look at. But the horned grebe and the eared grebe really are kind of black, gray, and white grebes right now, not very colorful. So we have those two species representing our grebes, and then we're going to look at the three scoter species that we get here in Colorado: surf scoter, white-winged scoter, and black scoter in the duck family Anatidae. And then we're going to look at the four regularly occurring loons: red-throated loon, Pacific loon, common loon, and yellow-billed loon. Now, there is a fifth loon that's been recorded in Colorado, the fifth member of the family Gaviidae. That's the Arctic loon, but it is a rarity. And I don't know that it's even been recorded in the late fall. I think the records have been other seasons here in Colorado, but we won't be dealing with that one, but we will be dealing with the four regular ones. Now, the scoters and the loons are kind of a little bit special for us as birders here in Colorado. You can find these different species, especially if you're following up on reports on eBird and things, but it's always fun and exciting and a little bit of a treat, or maybe a big treat. As I said earlier, the horned grebe and the eared grebe, they're really a core, regular part of our core autumn avifauna here in Colorado. So not so unusual, but definitely out there and providing some challenges for us to consider. So the very first thing I want to do, since we're talking about birds that to a large degree we're seeing out on reservoirs, often large bodies of water, I want to revisit the laws of Colorado reservoir birding that I first presented in our Colorado sea ducks bird bombs. And it's good to keep these things in mind, kind of keep a little bit of reality check for you, if you will. And the first one is one that it amazes me here in Colorado, but the first law, the bird you want to see is always at the other side. So no matter what, and I'm being a little bit tongue in cheek here, but no matter what, that bird's going to be way across the water, no matter what's going on. And somehow they always know that you're coming. and they work it out that way. And then if you go law number two, if you go to the other side and try to get to where that bird is, it will have moved to your original position. So you really can't win. And too often not, this is Colorado and it's going to be windy out there. And maybe more than you like, the lighting is going to be challenging. There's always that reality. And then the sad, sad reality that you get to the spot and the person that's already there says, well, the bird was here 5 minutes ago, but it's gone now. So some laws of reservoir birding to keep in mind to kind of help keep you grounded and down to earth. But there are some things you can do to kind of help things to work in your favor. One is when you're considering these birds, because they are often at somewhat of a distance, you want to have a spotting scope. So if you can go with somebody that has one, if you don't have one, or certainly bring your own, never be without a spotting scope when you're seriously looking for loons or scoters or even the grebes. It's really going to help make what you're seeing something that you can reasonably identify. So that's an important part. And then if you are able to plan for your lighting, so to pick your time perhaps, or where you're viewing from, to have the light be somewhat favorable from the side or behind you whenever possible, that's going to be really helpful. And I've also found it good to be viewing from a little bit above the water level. So if you're right down along the shoreline and your view is pretty much at water level, you have a little bit of a hindrance because you can't see uh, as well as you can when you're a little higher up. It's easier to scan for things when you're a little higher up off the water. So kind of keep that in mind. And then when you're watching these birds, sometimes it's helpful to see what's going on with their wings. Now, you won't see the or how they're diving. You may not see grebes flying around, but like the scoters, for example, the white-winged scoter, the one of the things we want to see that's not always visible on the floating bird is the white on the wings. But if you're watching for that wing flapping to go on, you'll have a chance to see that. Or how are the birds moving? How are they diving can sometimes be helpful as well. So pay attention for those things. And then realize that these are diving birds and they spend a lot of time underwater when they're actively feeding. And in some cases, like the scoters and the loons, they may be down for 45 seconds, a minute, something like that. And they may come up close to where they went down, or they may have moved underwater some fair distance. So you want to keep that in mind. It's important to keep scanning the water area. If you can't find something that you think should be there or is there or somebody saw it in that area, keep scanning through the area to make sure you're giving it a chance to be on the surface. And if they're actively feeding, that time on the surface might be kind of short. So that's a really important aspect to finding the birds or refinding them sometimes, is to really keep scanning around. So some viewing tips there to help your efforts be a little bit more productive. So let's start right in with the grebes, our little horn grebe and ear grebe. And I put up here our eBird frequency graph. This is for all of Colorado. The graph doesn't change a whole lot for different regions of the state. The timing is pretty much the same, frequency pretty much the same. So this is the percent of checklists that have the bird reported is what that frequency is. And the eared grebe in red and the horn grebe in blue on this graph. And we're looking at the fall season here, so we're not going to spend much time looking at the springtime on the graphs that I'm going to show tonight. But in the fall season, we see that here we are right in the third week of October, and we're heading right into the peak of the season for frequency of occurrence and really numbers of these two grebe species. And they both hit their peak around the early part of November. We see that the eared grebe is a little bit more frequent than the horn grebe, but they're both kind of in the ballpark of each other there. And we see that the eared is present a little more strongly early in the season since it's breeding in Colorado and nearby. The horn grebe breeds far to the north, and we have to wait for those migrants to get to us. And so it's just coming into its own around now and going to hit its peak in just within the next couple weeks and then taper off. Both these species will become pretty sparse during the wintertime, uh, especially as reservoirs freeze up. And certain locations are really good for grebes all through the winter. I always like to mention Lake Pueblo down in Pueblo County as a premier grebe observation reservoir here in Colorado. There's always a lot of grebes, and the lake doesn't freeze, so they're able to be enjoyed into the wintertime. So heading right into the peak for our grebes. And let's take a careful look here at our two species. We have the eared grebe on the left and the horn grebe on the right. And we can look first at some features that are kind of consistent depending on or irrespective of what time of year we're at. One is that the bills are different on these two birds. Now you need to consider that in a little bit of detail. And it's not so helpful for far away grebes, but when you're in closer and you can appreciate the bill shapes, the eared grebe has a longer, thinner bill. The horn grebe's bill is a little bit more stout. And importantly, the shape of the bill is different, especially the lower mandible. The eared grebe, the lower mandible is what we call recurved. It kind of curves upward from from the basal area. The horn grebe bill kind of goes out a little more straight there. So the shape's a little bit different on the bill. And another feature that I actually have, I think, yeah, so on the horn grebe, notice the tip of the bill is white. And you can look over to the ear grebe, and there is not a contrasting white tip on the ear grebe. So this is a little subtle mark that even at a pretty good distance, you can see it with a scope, but a lot of people don't think about it. It's kind of fun to notice it when you're out looking at these small grebes. The horn grebe has a pale tip on its bill. It's a contrasty pale tip. So good thing to look for. The shapes of the head on these grebes are a little bit different. The ear grebe is often peak-headed, and that peak would be towards the center of the head or maybe even a little bit forward of the center. And the horn grebe has a flatter crown profile. Oop, didn't want to quite go there yet. And so the shapes of the head are a little bit different. And this is this third point here. The butt on the eared grebe is often fluffy and riding high. Now, this is not a holding true all the time, but when the birds are relaxed, it is a feature that you might see and notice. If you got a fluffy butted grebe, that's a good sign of an eared grebe versus the horn. The rear quarters there kind of slope down into the water in a gentle fashion. So a little different shape that they present as you're looking at them out on the water. So we're focusing just on the non-breeding individuals here. We're not going to consider breeding plumages at all because with these grebes, we really don't see them in a breeding plumage at this time of year. So in the non-breeding plumage, they're essentially black, white, and grayish. And the eared grebe is kind of different from the horn in that it looks kind of messy. And you can say that the ear is smeared. So you see that there's not really any clean black and white lines here as there is on the horn grebe over on the right. We see on the head and face and on the neck on the horn grebe, there's some nice clean contrast, clean demarcations between dark and light areas. Whereas on the ear grebe, those kind of things are a little more grayish, a little more blended, and you don't have that clean, neat look. So eared is smeared is a good way to keep that in mind. And that can be a fantastic ID point when you're looking at a distance. Does it look like sort of the miniature clean Western grebe? That's the horn grebe look. Or is it smeared and kind of messy looking, particularly on the neck and the sides of the face? That's the eared grebe look. So we'll notice also that how the dark plays out on the face is a little bit different between these two. On the eared, the darkish area dips down below the eye, and there's no clean line here. And the horn grebe, the demarcation between the two color areas is pretty much at the eye, and the lines are pretty clean on that part of the bird. The ear often shows sort of a separate whitish area on the rear part of the cheek back here. On the horn grebe, since it's kind of cleaner on the cheek, it's not divided as it does on the ear. So you don't see sort of a separate whitish area. See in the ear here, you have kind of a pale area below and forward of the eye and another pale area back behind the eye divided by this grayish area that's coming down. That's going to vary a little bit on different individuals and maybe even what they're doing with their feathers at the particular moment, but it holds true most of the time. On the ear grebe, the lores, that area here between the bill and the eye, are usually dark, whereas on the horn grebe, not so easy to see in this image here, but we'll look at some others in a moment, it's pale there. And then, as I was mentioning, there's this grayish wash across the front part of the neck on the ear grebe, particularly along the top part of the neck. The horn grebe, it's either nicely white all along the foreneck, all the way down, or there might be a little bit of a wash on part of the neck, but it's not that smeared, eared, appearance that we have for the eared grebe. So let's bring up some other images. We can look at the continuation of these same ideas. Let's look particularly at the necks and cheeks on these birds. These eared grebes on the left are a little bit cleaner face than the first one I showed you, but you can see that kind of grayish coloration coming around, making the neck look a little bit messy compared to the neater kind of dark and white um, presentation that the horn grebe gives. Another great example of that. This particular picture shows the white tip on the horn grebe really well. In fact, all three of these pictures of the horn grebe on the right part of the screen, you can really see that pale tip. So next time you're out there looking at these grebes, unless they're way the heck out there following law number 1 of reservoir birding, unless they're way far out there, I want you to take a look as best you can, see if you can discern that pale tip. And if you get one in close, which we certainly sometimes do with these small grebes, you should really be able to see that and appreciate it. And while you're doing that, look at the shape of the bill. More of the same, nice clean horn grebe, a little messier looking ear to smeared appearance for the eared grebe there on the left. Notice the head profiles, the eared definitely having that peaked head, the horn grebe being a little more flat-headed or more smoothly low rounded head shape on the horn grebe. Okay, so a little quick presentation there of eared and horned, and now we can kind of look again from a summary perspective here. So we have horn grebes across the top part of the slide and ear grebes here across the bottom part of the slide. And remembering the features that we just talked about, the different bill shapes are apparent in the far left images. And that little white tip on the bill of the horn grebe, the different head shapes, the eared grebe being a little more peaked versus the flatter crown of the horn grebe. Nice, clean, dark and white appearance on the horn grebe's head and foreneck, whereas the eared grebe is smeared. So it's presenting a messy look on the face and the neck. So pretty good difference there. The eye color differential in these two pictures, by the way, is related to the age of the birds. This eared grebe on the bottom is a younger bird, probably a bird born the year the photo was taken in the fall. And the horn grebe here is an adult with the red eye. So the nice bright red eyes are indicative of the adult grebes. What else can we see here? We can see you can look at those kind of pale area on the lores of the horn grebes across the top, and the eared grebe lacking that pale area. So the lores, again, the area between the bill and the eye is dark on the eared grebe. Okay, and the kind of grayish neck. So I think just looking from that perspective of, is it kind of messy looking? Is it smeared looking versus is it kind of neat and clean? Does it remind me of maybe a small Western grebe like the one here on the right? Quite a bit smaller than a Western grebe in life, but they present a similar color pattern, the Western grebe being a very neat and tidy looking grebe. All right, so we checked out our grebes here, and I'm going to go into our first Let It Fly segment with Laura and Pete. And so I invite you guys to come in, and maybe we can take a look at these images here that I've numbered 1 to 4 and kind of go in order. And I don't think these are too hard. Let's see what you guys think about these.
Sure, yeah. Okay, so starting with number 1, Pete, what's the first thing that jumps out to you about those birds?
Well, since they're way on the other side of the reservoir by law, one
And
thing
it's
that
pretty
maybe you
windy out,
can
right?
exactly, one thing that you maybe only see at that distance is going to be kind of the shape or the outline. On these, I'm really seeing a peaked head with a peak right up above the eye. The bill looks pretty fine and has sort of that kind of up curved sense to it.
Yeah.
So some structural things that I would look at first.
Yeah, agreed. Those heads really do look peaked and almost they've almost got like a flat forehead. It's so peaked. And I also see, there's kind of a, if I'm imagining through my scope and it's blurry because it's windy, there's this line, the contrast between the black and the white on the face is is there, but it's a little smudgy. And the neck is pretty smudgy overall too. So it sounds like we're going with eared grebe.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Sweet. All right, number two. Well, if we're thinking about head shape, since we just looked at those other ones, this one has a very different head shape, in my opinion. It's much more flat. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely flat. I like your point about the forehead being steep on the eared grebe and more sloped on the horned. I believe I see a little bit of white right there on the tip of the bill,
Yeah.
and really sharp, crisp white cheeks
Yeah. So horned for that one. Yeah.
for sure.
Great.
All right, number three. So this bird is actively pedaling away from us, it looks like. I don't know if you can hear my cat. Please, kitty. Um, this one, I can't really tell a whole lot about that bill. It's like it's a little turned away, and so I see some things, but you know, I- I'm hesitant to like call it based on the bill. Like it looks like it might have a little bit of white at the tip, but that might be a photo artifact. Um, the head shape, it kind of just looks round. Maybe it's peaked, maybe it's not. What do you think, Pete?
Yeah, the shape and the bill on this one are pretty tough, but uh, I'm gonna go straight to plumage and look at that white cheek that goes all the way back to the nape. And I think I see a little bit of a white dot right in front of the eye there
Oh yeah.
that would make me lean toward horned on this one. Yeah.
Sounds good. And you can see that white mark on the lores on number two
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So far we have eared number one and horned number two and three.
Cool. So number four, looking at that one, again, that steep forehead is what kind of jumps out at me. Um, and in addition, like we don't see that white dot that we see on the lores of the horned grebes in this slide. The demarcation between the sort of white of the cheek uh, and the top of the head is a little smudgier. So you think eared, Pete?
Yeah, I do think that we have kind of that white splotch back toward the nape.
Yeah.
Um, and the eye seems really round to me. I always think eared grebes look a little bit surprised. Um, Whereas the
That's a
horned
good,
grebes are maybe a little bit more chill. Uh, the eared grebe has those wide, round eyes, and the top of its head is sticking up like it's just gotten a little bit of a shock or something.
I
yeah, I
love
hadn't
it.
thought about that, but it plays out for these images. That's pretty good. All right, great job. And now we've got a couple more here.
Cool. All right. Well, number one, this one looks like it's barreling straight towards us. Um, what jumps out to you, Pete?
With the when we were talking about shape and structure, the broad head when you see it in this angle um, is it does not look like it has a peak in the front. It just looks like it's really broad and flat.
Yeah,
Um,
good point. Yeah. And also like even from this angle, you can see that crisp sort of line between the black of the head and the white of the cheek. And I can almost imagine a little bit of white at the tip of that bill. So,
yep, and those white lures are pretty
Mhm.
oh
clear in
yeah.
this one as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this one I'm pretty confident to say horned on this guy.
Yeah. No surprise happening there. Yeah.
So it's got a little bit of a messier neck than some that we see. And there could be a couple reasons for that. I don't recall the date of this photo, but sometimes when the birds are in transition from one plumage to another on the horn grebe, it can lose that nice clean white that we normally would see on their foreneck. In the case of this bird, I'm not sure, but still the facial pattern with the nice clean demarcation between the dark crown and the white cheek is typical of the horned. What about number two?
Number two. Well, this one really is on the other side of the reservoir, I think. Um, this bird looks pretty dark compared to some of the other ones that we've seen.
It really does. It seems quite smeared if we want to use the rhyming mnemonic there to me.
Yeah. And the head, doesn't really jump out as like a peak, but it does look like it kind of has a steep forehead to me.
It does. And the bill, even at the distance, looks like it's pretty fine. Not really dagger shaped like on a horned would be. So um, I'm going to throw my hat toward eared for this one, if you agree.
Agree, yeah.
Yeah, and the bird is looking a little bit towards the camera, so we can't judge the head shape maybe quite as well in terms of the peak element. Another thing I see on that bird is it's got that kind of high riding butt, that kind of fluffy butt look that the ear, when it's relaxed, often shows. So I got that right. So here's a last image for our grebes
Oh
for
boy.
tonight. And
Uh,
this one's kind of far away,
yeah.
so, but how many species do you think we might have in this image just from what you can see before we zoom in with the scope a little bit?
I think between 2 and 4.
Okay.
You deserve that, David.
Well, here we got the scope zoomed in. I think
Okay.
there's just two.
Okay. Now there's two for sure. Yeah, so we've got a smaller grebes and then we also have some larger grebes. Those larger ones to me look like Western grebes with those kind of the white and black on the neck. The black doesn't, it's difficult to see with this, but the ones we would expect are Western grebes. Clark's grebes would have that black line on their face up a little bit higher. And then our smaller grebes are probably going to be our horned or eared grebes for this time of year. Man, this horned eared grebes are they're out there in the wind, aren't they?
If the horned grebe is supposed to look like a small Western grebe in terms of its black and white pattern, I kind of feel like these ones are less boldly marked
Yeah,
than the bigger Western grebes.
yeah, that's a good point. Kind of using them as a comparison. Yeah, I would agree, and it's hard to pick up much detail on those two small birds, but um, I don't really see a lot of bright white jumping out on them. The smaller bird on the right has a little bit of that, but overall they look um, kind of dark and smudgy. So I would love to watch these birds for a while just to kind of confirm it, but I agree. I think eared is probably what they are.
Very good. And plus that high riding rear end there, especially evident on the right hand of those two small grebes. I think you're right. So that nice clean white of the horn grebe would definitely be uh, just like it's visible on the western. It would be standing out were we to, or is it actually present on those two little ones? But it doesn't seem to be. So some smeared ears there. Cool. Here's this little summary of our points again there, and we'll continue on with our adventure in our reservoir birds. And so we'll turn to our scoters and put up our frequency graph again for all of Colorado. And what we can notice is that this is the best time of year to find scoters in Colorado is the late fall. So again, here we are in the third week of October, and we're well into the time when the surf scoter is the most prominent. And we see that the white-winged scoter in red and the black scoter in green line here have a little bit later arrival, but they all peak there in November, from early November into the middle part of the month, and then they taper off. And so it's a migratory push going through. And to some degree, as we get actually into winter proper, we're dealing with, again, with reservoirs freezing and birds having to move on to other places. But we often will have some scoters around here or there during the wintertime, as you can see over on the left part of the graph. We see the surf scoter kind of drops out as a winter presence after its fall peak, becomes pretty sparse. But the other two, the black and the white-winged scoter, are a little bit more frequent during the wintertime than the surf scoter is. So, but we're definitely heading into the core time for all three of these species. And I think if you checked out eBird right now today on the 23rd of October for Colorado, you'd see that there are some reports of surf scoters and maybe very little or almost nothing of the other two, but that should change over the coming few weeks as they come in. So, little note there on the top of the slide: females and immatures, either immature males or females, are the most common in Colorado by far, and the adult males of all three species are um, less often encountered. Now, with the surf scoter, the adult males are actually pretty rare. And taking a quick look through photos on eBird, the only images I saw of adult type male surf scoters were from the spring. So the birds that we're seeing in the fall, you can pretty much forget about that crazy looking adult male surf scoter I've got shown here with its beautiful multicolored bill and those white patches on the head and neck, because you're not going to see a bird looking like that. The other two species, though, the white-winged and the black scoter, you can see adult males of those species, but they're not as frequent as the females or immature males are. So you might get lucky to see those pretty males, but we're not going to talk about these anymore or look at any more pictures of them. So enjoy it now. The identifications are pretty straightforward. Unless the bird is just super far away, but usually you can tell what it is if you have the adults based on their distinctive markings on the head and the bill. Okay, so here's more like what we're used to seeing when we encounter scoters here in Colorado. So now we're looking at females and immatures, and I'm not going to spend any time really differentiating between the sexes for these young birds. Some images that I might show you could be young males, but the features that we're looking at for identification are basically the same for young males as they are for young females or adult females. So we don't have to worry too much about sexing them. It's fun to try to figure it out. One of the things you might notice on young males is, like with the surf scoter, it might be developing some different colored areas on the bill, or the shapes of the markings on the head might be a little bit different. But we're not going to worry anymore about those little distinctions. So here we've got our three species: surf on the left, white wing in the middle, and black over on the right. And they're generally dark-bodied ducks with some element of white on the head. And in the case of the white-winged scoter, true to its name, there's white in the wings. But hey, guess what? You don't always see that. So the white is on the secondaries, as we'll see in a later picture in a little bit. But depending on how the bird is holding its wing and what's going on with the scapulars here and the tertials, it can cover over the white, which would be showing in this area back around here. We'll keep an eye out for that real soon. But sometimes you don't see it. So you can't always assume that it's a white-winged scoter, I'm going to see the white in the wing. It may not be evident at the moment in which you're looking at the bird. So they're generally dark brown, blackish colored ducks with some white element going on the face or even onto the neck in the case of the black scoter. So let's notice with the surf scoter, it has generally a couple of markings of white on the face. The shape of those and the intensity can vary a little bit, but there's a couple markings there, and it's got a contrasting dark cap, which is paler than the cheek area here on the side of the bird's face. So notice that capped look, and we can right away go over to the white-winged scoter and see that it doesn't present a strongly contrasting capped look because its cheeks are darker than on the surf scoter. So we're not talking about the white markings, but the brown of the face versus the darker brown of the crown, pretty much the same tone or pretty close on the white wing, but often a nice color tone difference in the surf scoter, giving it a capped look. Now, the black scoter is pretty different there, so we don't worry about capped or not capped. Let's look at those white markings on the face here. And one thing we can notice on the surf scoter is we call this mark the laurel mark. So again, between the bill and the eye. And it's usually not a clean oval, but is some kind of a little bit of an odd shape, often with a kind of a vertical element to it. The white-winged scoter has a much more oval shape here, and it seems to project out, not on all birds, but in a lot of them, projects out onto the bill area. So obviously those are feathers there, not a part of the bill, but they come out further onto what appears to be the bill area. So notice the shape of that and the extension of that laurel spot on the white-winged scoter as being pretty different. The black scoter is pretty different yet in that it has a large, extensive white cheek, no white spots, but a whole white cheek and the white extending down onto the neck. So if anything, this might recall like a white-cheeked wintertime male ruddy duck, which has would not have white down on the neck and be a little smaller than the scoter, but it might have a clean white cheek like this. Now the female ruddy would have a brown line through that pale cheek, so a little different there, but a little bit of a recall of a ruddy duck kind of a look there on the black scoter. You can also look at the shape of the head, and this vary a little bit from individual to individual, and especially if they're diving. I got to keep in mind that when diving ducks and other diving birds are about to go down, they flatten out their crown and kind of smooth it down. So the head shape might change in a very actively diving bird, or especially right before it takes a dive. But the surf scoter tends to be kind of flat-headed, and the white-winged scoter maybe a little more angular head, not quite the same flat profile of the surf scoter. And the black scoter tends to have a kind of a dome-shaped rounded head. So some differences in head shape. Then we can consider the bills. The surf scoter seems to have the biggest bill out of the three, and we say that his bill is the culmen, which is this upper line on the bill, is kind of convex. It's not projecting downward as we see a little bit here on this white-winged scoter. That's kind of a subtle thing, but it makes the bill look a little bit fatter and stouter on the surf scoter than the white-winged. The black scoter, we don't look at bill shape quite so much. Its bill, it's hard to judge from these two photos, but the black scoter has a somewhat smaller bill than the surf and the white-winged scoter. So some points I really want to focus on is where is the white on the face? How is it shaped? How is it distributed? Is it very extensive? Is it in spots? Is it an oval shaped spot extending out over the bill area? Or is it kind of an oddly shaped spot that's not heading out onto the bill as on the surf? And then what do we see in like a capped look or a not capped look? So now we put up some more images of the scoters here. And when we're talking about capped, we're talking about, is there some contrast between the side of the face and the top of the crown, or is there very little contrast, giving it a not capped look as in the white wing? And now here we can see the white that's on the secondary, same area where we see white, say on a gadwall wing on the speculum. It's a little more extensive on the white-winged scoter, but sometimes that's all you see is a little bit of a white line on the closed wing. And that can vary, as I was saying, as to how extensive it is. You might just get a hint of it, or it might be very plainly obvious. So a great giveaway mark when you see white there, white-winged scoter, and you can consider the other features to kind of back it up for you. So contrast on the face. Here again, that pale area is kind of a sideways oval projecting out onto the bill area a little bit. I think it's even going to develop to encompass a little farther area out here as this bird gets a little older versus the odd sort of shape with a vertical component on the surf scoter. White-winged black scoter, again, extensively pale cheek. It's not as white as the one in the photo above. Sometimes they're a little bit duskier, but that same pattern of extensive white and pale going down onto the neck on that black scoter. So put up a couple of photos here, each with two individuals of each species. And again, looking at the shapes of that forward pale mark on the face of the surf and the white wing, kind of an odd vertical shape on surf, more of a flat oval extending out onto the bill. On the white wing, notice it's not as clean white on these individuals. That can vary a little bit, perhaps with age. We won't worry about that. And this bird is not showing any white there, so it's not giving us any clue for the white wing, but notice the contrast between the crown and the face is pretty low compared to the surf scoters here with an almost blackish brown looking crown and a more medium brown face, a nice contrast. And that same facial pattern we see on the black scoter with the rounded head. And sometimes the black scoter will have its tail cocked up in a fashion that can remind you of a ruddy duck. I was talking about how they have superficial resemblance to a male ruddy duck, and sometimes the black scoter, especially I think when it's diving, can have its tail poked up at different times. So you might see that and maybe get fooled a little bit by that. Here we can see the open wings on the surf and the white wing, and you can see that I think pretty much all the secondaries are white here on the white wing scoter, even extending up onto these secondary coverts. These are the tertials in here that are not um, white. And on the surf scoter, looking at the top of the wing, it's just brown there. So a little bit of white is showing on the underside of the wing, but we don't generally worry about that part of the wing when we're looking at these birds towards identification. But there's those white patches on the white wing scoter. Didn't have a black scoter with wings open, but I have one here having a nice meal of something. Um, these are birds that feed on the bottom of the reservoirs or lakes. They go down and they get crayfish. They like those a lot, or other kinds of shellfish, and sometimes even worms and things like that that are down in the top part of the substrate at the bottom of the water. All right, so here again, looking at the facial patterns, especially that spot on the lores there between the eye and the bill, contrasting. Here he's got a crayfish, the white winged scoter with that nice oval shape extending out over the bill. Surf scoter, kind of vertical component, not going out on the bill. Of course, a very different pattern on the black scoter. So we're going to go right into let it fly with you guys here. So went over a lot of stuff real quick, but this is a good chance to review with our first three images here. So starting out with number one, what do you notice?
Well, Laura, if you don't mind me going first here, um, I'm gonna jump straight to that little bit of white that I see in the secondaries showing there.
Yeah.
And I'll let you do the hard part.
Yeah, so that's kind of a good clue. So I guess the looking at the head of the duck, since we've talked about that a lot, it doesn't have that. There's no strong contrast from the top of the head to like below the eye in the cheek area where it's dark. So it definitely doesn't have that big pale cheek down onto the neck of the black scoter, and it doesn't have that darker cap versus cheek color of the black scoter. So, and if you look closely at that bird, you can kind of see how the white near the bill kind of pushes out on towards the bill there a little further than you would expect a black scoter to. So I think this one's a pretty good example of a white-winged scoter.
And I would say that as this bird, maybe as it gets a little older, I'm not quite sure what's going on, but I'll bet you that this will develop to be more white there. You can see it's a
Yeah.
little paler than the rest there. Um, Okay, so you're thinking white wing scoter, which is kind of a dead giveaway, as Pete noticed with that with the white in the wing, but you don't always see it. But it's good to fall in on that when you get a chance. So how about white wing scoter for number one?
Yeah. So number two, looking at that one, um, it it looks to me like there's a bit of a contrast between the dark sort of cap-like coloration on the head, and then it has a bit of a paler cheek area. And we're seeing, it's got the two kind of white spots. So even if this bird was really far away and the lighting was bad and I see the two white spots, I start to think, okay, it's either a black scoter or it's a white-winged scoter. And with that cap, and the fact that we've already had a white-winged scoter example just now on the slide, um, I'm thinking black. What do you think, Peter? What else do you see about this bird?
Do you mean to say black?
No, I meant surf scoter. Sorry, that's the jet lag
Yeah,
kicking in.
I thought so.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I'll just you know, point specifically to the white spot in front of the eye being much more vertical,
Yeah, yeah.
rather than kind of a horizontal oval. And I don't, the in the bill shape being just a little bit different, not as much feathering down onto the bill, and it being just a little bit more of a concave slope on the top. Sounds good for surf for me too.
Yeah.
Or sorry, the flatter slope. What am I trying to say? I
Well,
don't
so
even
I
have
think
jet lag.
if you look at the outer part, if you look at the outer part of the bill on both these birds, you can see how this one kind of sags inward here on the white wing, giving it a concave, and then the surf scoter either straight or maybe bulging out a little bit, so convex there. So gives the bill a different shape. Sometimes hard to assess that. But yeah, and you can notice it on these photos. So we're thinking white wing number one and surf scooter number two. How about number three then? And maybe it's a giveaway because we've already had one of each of the others, but
I'm pretty sure that's a ruddy duck.
okay. Could be. Can't see the neck very well on this bird. It's got its head kind of scrunched down.
Yeah.
So all we're seeing is pretty much the cheek there.
I'm never going to be able to just look at a ruddy duck again,
That's right.
without having to differentiate it with a black scoter now. So I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse.
It's always good to look carefully at all of the individuals, even of the common birds. So you never know what you're going to find. Um, what do you think for number three then?
A black scoter.
Black scooter.
Yeah,
Cool.
definitely that big white cheek.
Cool. Yeah, it's pretty different facial pattern there for the black scooter. And here we've got a summary of our ID points that we'll have up there for our video, but we're going to proceed right into the next slide here. So these are not as great of views as the previous slide. And we've got multiple birds in each of these images.
Yeah, so looking at number one, we've got four individuals, and the first thing that kind of jumps out to me is that the bird in the forward right position has a very different sort of head markings and bill shape compared to the other three. So um, starting with that one, uh, I noticed that strong contrast between the dark head and then the white or pale cheek. And that paleness goes down onto the neck. And its body shape doesn't look like a ruddy duck to me. And again, with that white going down onto the neck, I'm gonna call that one out as a black scoter.
I'm with you on that one, Laura.
Cool, yeah.
It looks more like a regular duck. Uh, and and then the other ones have kind of that more wonky head shape that,
Yeah.
that more screams Scoter at us. And on these, I see the two white spots on the face. So that's, going to be either a surf or a white winged.
Hmm.
I don't see any white on the wings, which
No.
isn't, a for sure giveaway. But the white in front of the eye uh, looks very vertical on at least the left two, and maybe on that back one.
Yeah, the back one doesn't doesn't jump super. It's like maybe a little vertical, but it's definitely not horizontal.
And
You
not
So
know?
really
yeah,
projecting,
oh, go ahead.
not really projecting out onto the bill on any of those.
Yeah, it's not really going forward. So, do we think all three of those are surf? They look pretty
That's what
consistent.
I'd say. I would say that, yeah.
Their bill shape is similar.
The lighting's a little challenging to discern the capped versus not capped, but I think this forward left bird, it shows the best with the paler cheek and the dark crown area
Yeah.
to give it kind of a capped look there. Nice contrast of the head shape too, with the kind of rounded domed look on this black scoter versus kind of a flat head on the surf. Okay, so I think you guys are concluding the three surfs and one black there for image number one.
Yep. So image number two, we've got four birds again. And one thing that jumps out to me is some white wing patches on two and maybe three of those birds. Yeah, maybe that one's like that. Maybe that's a white wing patch. I'm not sure. What do you think, Pete?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the leftmost two have distinct white on it. And if I look at the the third from the left, uh, which might have a little bit of white patch in the wing, but boy, the forward white patch next to the bill looks pretty oval to me,
Yeah.
which would also kind of point toward the white winged, I believe.
Yeah, agreed. Now, what do you think about that? The far right duck, the odd duck out there.
Well, boy, there's a sure a big contrast with the dark cap and the consistently white on the cheek.
Hmm.
Looks like a real round head, kind of dome shaped. So that does not look like excuse me, a white winged at all. And it doesn't really look like a surf either. So would you be all right with calling that one black?
For sure, yeah.
Very good. So again, with the head contrast, a little challenging on the particular photos, but the other than the white spots, the head looks kind of all similarly dark without a contrasty capped look.
Hmm.
So we have three white wings and one black there. So let's look at number three. And what do you think about these birds?
Well, I'm seeing the two white spots on the face. So that's
Yeah.
going to tell us either white winged or surf.
Yeah. I don't see any white wings. Although
It,
I can't really see the bodies of the birds under the number three. And we know that it's not always the lack of a white wing isn't always an indicator of what it is or isn't.
with the light being pretty good on these ones, I believe I can really see a dark cap on
Mm.
just about all of them.
Mhm.
So, and I would call, looking at those bills, they're pretty slopey, and they don't have that like notched or almost bent look that I would look for in a white wing scoter. And the white dots on the in front of the eye are they don't they don't look they look maybe a little bit vertical, but definitely not horizontal and like pushing out onto the bill.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. I would, I'd say all five of these are probably surfs then.
Yeah, I think so.
Very
Oof.
good. Good job. And the one on the right here, especially showing that kind of flat-headed look that
Yeah.
surf scoter often presents. Great work on our scoters. So let's leap into the loons here. And we, just like our scoters, we're definitely in the season for enjoying loons in Colorado and still in the early part of the season. Just like with the scoters, they come into their own in the later part of October and then especially in November and even extending out into December and into the beginning part of winter. So we've got common loon in green and then Pacific loon in red, um, the red-throated in blue, and the yellow-billed fittingly has a yellow line here. We can notice that the common loon is quite a bit more frequent, almost in the range of almost an order of magnitude, not quite, but quite a bit more frequent than the other three species. And then the Pacific is kind of number two, red-throated number three, and then the yellow-billed comes to its presence here in Colorado, especially very late in the fall and into the early part of winter. So common loon is kind of the loon to try to eliminate when you see a loon out there. And you got to remember that sometimes they're pretty far, and it can be challenging, especially if the bird's diving and not on the surface too much, to decide what you're looking at. But the common loon is kind of the one you want to eliminate because it is a lot more frequent than the other three species that we're considering here. And it can also be aware of just from kind of thinking about how the loons look. The immature loons are far and away the most common in Colorado in the fall and winter time. So most of the loons you're going to see of any of the species are birds that were born this year or in the same year, or as you get past the new year, you know what I mean. And there are adults that you can find, but they're quite a bit more uncommon. And then seeing a loon in the fall in its fancy breeding plumage is pretty rare, and you generally don't. Occasionally you will or could, but we generally don't worry about the breeding plumage loons, and they're usually pretty easy to identify when you're presented with one. I know Pete had a great encounter with a breeding plumage red-throated loon this year, but it was way back in August, which is kind of early for a red-throated loon, as we can appreciate from this graph. It doesn't even have a bump at that time. A little tiny bit of something going on maybe, but that was a good bird, and it would happen to be in breeding plumage, so I'm sure that was a great treat. But these birds that we're looking at in these images are all juvenile loons, and one of the things you can focus on, especially in the Pacific common and yellow-billed for that, is they have kind of a scaly pattern created by pale tips on each of the feathers that give it this, see that pattern on the back of all three of these individuals. Red-throated is a little different. It doesn't quite give a scaly look, but with the other three, that's the pattern you get. And watch for that when you see a loon. Take a look at the patterning on the back. If it's an adult, it's kind of much more evenly colored and doesn't have that kind of lined or scaly type look that we see on those individuals. Here's some breeding plumage loons just to give a thrill. Who knows, maybe we get lucky. I remember last year going into the end of October, I think it was, or beginning of November, there was a breeding plumage yellow-billed loon up in Park County. So that was a little bit unusual to have a breeding plumage bird. So it's a possibility, but we won't talk anymore about that. When we are looking at loons, we want to consider these basic things. How big is the bird? This is kind of hard if it's by itself or not with other loons, but as you watch loons for a while, you begin to get a sense of relative size. What's the shape of the head like? What's the shape of the bill and its heft or heaviness? What color is the bill? And is it held at an upward tilt or not? And then what is the pattern on the face and the neck? So those are the main areas that you want to consider. And so now we'll switch back to the dull plumage individuals that we're mostly going to encounter. And first we're going to deal with the red-throated and the Pacific loon, red-throated on the left, Pacific on the right. One of the things we can notice on the red-throated loon is it's a relatively pale loon, and it has this distinctive shape of a kind of a smallish bill that's most often held up at an angle, tilted upward. And so distinct, that's kind of the red-throated loon's characteristic posture is to have that upward tilt. Now there is another loon that does that regularly, or the bill shape helps to contribute. That's the yellow-billed loon, much bigger bird with a different looking bill. but the red-throated loon, that upward tilt. And notice that the head is decidedly grayish, and it kind of has a blended transition from the gray on the back of the neck to the white on the front of the neck. So it kind of blends from gray to white, blending from gray to white. Here, a lot more extensive gray on this individual. This bird is a little cleaner on the lower left. This is an adult red-throated loon. So they actually look a little different. We don't see so many of the adults. Most of ours will look more like these other individuals for the red-throated loon. And this particular bird's not holding its bill up at much of an angle. There's still a little bit of that. But you can get a sense of the small size of the bill there. So a little smaller loon, a little more slender, paler, grayer appearance, less contrast on the neck with kind of blended transitions there. The bill often held upward and a very sloped forehead for the red-throated loon. So let's contrast with the Pacific loon on the right. The Pacific is a little bit bigger. It's not as big as the common or the yellow-billed, which is our biggest, but it's bigger than the red-throated. And we can see the bill is usually held kind of level and is a little more stout than the red-throated's bill. And we can also see some other real differences on the face and the neck. First, the let's look at this little mark here that's called the chin strap. So a lot of Pacific loons have a nice contrasting dark line across the base of the chin throat area here, or where the top of the neck meets the throat, and call that the chin strap mark. You can see it on all of these individuals. This angle of the photo for the lower left Pacific loon isn't so great for that, but it shows up pretty well on a lot of individuals in the field. Sometimes it doesn't, may not be very pronounced, but a lot of times it's a really good mark to be watching for. And then let's look at the colors on the neck. You'll notice there's really three colors here. There's the white in the front of the neck, and then a dark almost blackish area where the side of the neck meets the front of the neck, and then a pale nape. You can see that really well on this upper right Pacific loon, white, that blackish line, and a pale nape. So if you have a contrasting pale nape and you have a contrasting dark line on the side of the neck, excellent marks for Pacific loon. Notice how that's really missing over in these red-throated loons. They don't have that dark line at the side of the neck, and they don't have a contrasting pale nape. The nape is pretty much the same color as the rest of the side of the neck. So really good mark for a Pacific loon. Their head shape is a little more rounded than on the red-throated, so you don't get as quite a sloping forehead that you see on the red-throated loon. Here's I had some other images here. There they are. Of our two species again, just kind of focusing on the up-tilted bill on the red-throated on the left versus more level-held bill on the Pacific on the right. Look for that chin strap mark. Not very evident on this lower right bird, but still there. Much more so maybe on this upper left Pacific loon. And we can also look for the three colors on the neck. So like a tricolored neck, white, blackish, and pale gray on the nape. White, a little less blackish, but still darker, and a pale nape. And same pattern on these other Pacific loons as well, versus the kind of blended look on the red-throated loon without that dark line coming down the side and without a contrasting paler gray nape. So some good differences for our two smaller loons. So let's switch over to the two bigger species, and they really are quite a bit larger. The yellow-billed is the biggest loon that in the world. It's our biggest loon here in Colorado. But the common loon's a pretty hefty bird, and they both have big bills and kind of big heads. And so a really different look when you have a reasonable view compared to the two smaller ones we looked at. So with the common loon, we can focus on the fact that if we're just going to look at the bill, let's notice that a lot of times it looks gray. It may have some paler color tones to it, but it is often gray, or it has some dark areas along the culmen. So that's that top edge of the upper mandible or maxilla. And so there's usually a dark line along the very top of the bill, and usually a dark line along the cutting edges of the bill, or tomia is that area there. And you can see that dark line along the cutting edges, dark line along the top of the upper part of the bill, is a distinctive mark for common loon that we don't see on the yellow-billed loon. With the common loon often looks like it has kind of what I call a blocky head. It has a forehead knob and kind of an angle in the back part of the crown, often giving it kind of a squarish looking head or a blocky head. Profile very different from the Pacific loon's rounded head. And then there is often two little eye arcs here on the face, the upper arc being more pronounced because of the contrast, but there's a lower arc as well, and they're just divided across the middle part. So you get two eye arcs, which is a good mark on the common loon. And then another great feature is the pattern on the neck. So we know that the breeding plumage birds have that nice dark and white collar thing going on. The non-breeding plumage birds that we see have a partial collar. So let's look at this one that I'm got the cursor on here, the upper right common loon. You can see this partial collar coming out. It doesn't go all the way to the front of the neck, but it comes out. And above that is kind of a backward pointing, almost triangular shaped area. So that pattern of that backward pointing triangle and the partial collar coming out, which may be more or less distinct, is distinctive for common loon. There's that backward pointing triangle and the partial collar. So common loon, we've got a grayer bill with a dark upper edge, dark cutting edges, blocky head, eye arcs, that backward triangle over a partial collar on the neck. And it's generally a darker loon. Certainly than the yellow-billed loon. So if we switch to the right on the yellow-billed, right away we notice some differences. The bill is much paler. It often looks, the yellow part is in the breeding season. When we see them here in the winter in a non-breeding plumage or immature bird, notice that patterning on the upper part of a couple of these yellow-billed loons here, that nice scaly pattern I was talking about. But at this time of year, the bill is more of a straw color, or even sometimes kind of whitish, depending on the light. But it's a different color than on the common loon. And the top of the bill, that culmen, is not dark, particularly on the outer part. So you might see some dark in close to the head, but when you get out to the outer part of the bill, there's no dark there. And the cutting edge is not as contrasty dark as on the common loon. So you can look left or right, kind of compare those. Another thing that's really different on the bills of these two loons is the shape of the lower, the mandible here on the bottom. On the yellow-billed loon, it curves upward, it recurves. And so you have this nice angle, and it gives the sense of the bill being pointed upward. Now, a lot of the times the bird does hold its bill up at an angle, like you can see on the picture on the upper right of the yellow-billed loons. It's got its bill up at an angle, and you can see that recurvature even accentuating that kind of upward tilted look of the bill on the yellow-billed loon. It has usually a prominent forehead knob. That's this kind of blob out here, also giving it kind of a blocky look. When the bird is diving, you're going to see less of that forehead knob and the blocky look, and it may look more smooth crowned, perhaps like this bird on the lower right. But a lot of times you'll be able to discern that prominent knob on the front of the head, kind of a classic look of a yellow-billed here. And what else you can notice if you contrast with these common loons that have a rather dark head and hind neck is the yellow-billed loon is much more sandy tan colored and not dusky dark gray. So often it will also present a little bit of a partial collar, but it's a sandy colored one. And what can often stand out on the face of a yellow-billed loon is this auricular spot. It may not be very well defined, but there's kind of a dot in the back part of the cheek area or on the auriculars, ear coverts of the yellow-billed loon. You can see it there, there. It's not so evident in this particular photo here on the upper left, but that auricular spot is a good thing to be looking for. But notice the overall color of the bird, particularly the head and the neck, and notice the shape and coloration of the bill. Kind of a lot of pale going on around the eye, not showing so much eye arc, but just a general pale area around the eye. So here are some different images of both species, and we can look at the neck patterns, look at the bill coloration, and the overall color tone. So that kind of sandy tan color on the yellow-billed loons versus the dusky gray on the common loons, that nice pronounced partial color on the common loon with that backward pointing triangle, the darker bill with dark along the upper edge of the culmen, and different with the yellow-billed loon there on the right. So let's bring all four species together in a little loon lineup. And just we're not going to go over the details here, but just look at the patterns on the neck and the overall color of the head and neck of these different individuals, from the very pale gray blended look of the red-throated loon to the tricolored look on the Pacific, white, dark, and pale nape, and the pattern partial collar backward triangle on the common loon. There's the auricular spot on this yellow-billed loon, very prominent forehead knob there. Look at the bill, smallest bill on the red-throated, getting bigger on Pacific, bigger yet on the common loon and gray, and then the biggest bill on the yellow-billed loon, and that kind of pale straw color there on the yellow-billed loon. All right, so we'll leap right into our Let It Fly with Laura and Pete, and we've got four loons here. Pictures, well, the one on sorry, the one on the lower right is not a bad image, but the others are a little step down from what we were just looking at, a little closer to reality, maybe. What do you think about number one?
Yes, number one. So first thing is like, what's going on with that bill?
It's huge.
It's
It
huge.
looks
It's
big.
huge, or it's got something in its bill. Like that's what I'm looking at. But then I also noticed like a pretty strong um, contrast between the back of the neck and then the front of the throat. It's very contrasty, very different colors there. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing overall quite a dark bird, especially the head, especially the bill. The back seems pretty dark, and boy, like you say that the clear contrast between the like the chin and the throat and the back of the head is pretty pronounced.
yeah.
I think I maybe even see a little bit of white above and below the eye.
Oh yeah, that's a good call.
Those little eye arcs.
Yeah.
I wonder if the apparent bill size is somehow related to the lighting and the angle of the sun. I don't know. But it is a big bill, so that might help us rule out a couple of the smaller billed species.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
so what are our big billed loons? We've got the yellow billed loon and then the common loon, right? And this doesn't look like a yellow billed loon to me. It's a very dark overall gray bill. Um, we can't really see kind of the lower part of the neck to look, I'm trying to like make up like a notch in the side of its neck, but I can't quite get there.
Wrong angle.
Yeah, it's the wrong angle. We need to wait for it to swim around or maybe dive and swim half a mile and pop back up somewhere. But
Exactly.
um
all I have to say is having these birds sit here for this amount of time for us without diving is awesome. I've never seen a loon do that. It's like the easiest observation ever. So
Only on
thank you
bird
so much
bombs.
for arranging that for us, David.
You're welcome. You can also appreciate the shape of the lower on the mandible here on this particular bird. It doesn't have that kind of recurvature, but it's a little more like a dagger.
mhm. Yeah, yeah.
So what do you think? That
I'm
all
good with
adds
comment
up
on
for
that one.
common loon.
Yeah, I think it's
Good.
a
Yeah.
common.
I think I just have one. Nope, not yet. I thought I
Ah,
had
don't
them all
look.
separated. Didn't look. Okay, so we're going with common loon, eye arcs, a dark colored bill, no recurvature, fairly dark on the upper part area here and back of the neck. So how about number two?
Yeah, number two. So number two, going back to just overall bill size, um, this one has a much daintier bill, much finer bill. And so that kind of puts us in the Pacific or red-throated loon category. Um, and then with with Pacific loon, I'd be looking for some real contrast on the neck with the sort of white, really dark, and then grayer versus a more kind of even gradation. So um, that's kind of what jumps out at me at first. How about you, Pete?
Yeah, it does seem to be a quite light-bodied bird compared to, the common and the yellow-billed. It's not nearly so chunky. It looks like it has the bill held up at slightly at an angle. But I agree with you. I'm not seeing that chin strap. I'm not seeing the dark outline around the throat at all. The white on the face, is right up to the eye. Um,
It is.
and so this one to me looks looks like a red-throated.
Very
Yeah.
good. Let's go down to the lower left there, number 3.
Yeah, so number three is again a dainty billed loon. So comparing that with number two, which we just talked about as a red-throated loon, this one, you can see that chin strap if you look, which is kind of cool as a um, a feature to look for. And you can really see the three different contrasting values on its neck. The kind of pale gray on the back of the neck, the dark line going down the middle, and then the white uh, kind of up on the front of the neck. So I think this is our Pacific loon. What do you think, Pete?
Oh, I concur. That the dark outline around the white throat, both on the sides and on the chin strap, the bill looks like it is almost curved down a little bit.
Yeah.
These guys almost seem like they have kind of a smirk where they kind of putting the side of their what's it called, the gape down a little bit, just to sort of give an overall downward curvature on the whole beak and chin area. Yeah, I would totally go with Pacific on this one.
And its head is pretty horizontal. It's not tilted up really like a
Great.
red-throated.
Yeah, sloped forehead for sure.
Okay, so Pacific for number 3, and that if we assume we have all 4 species here, that makes number 4 kind of easy, but there are some good features there. What's the most important things to look at on number 4, do you think?
Well, that's a big bill. I wouldn't want to get caught by that thing. And it's got some yellow tones to it. It's not very dark. It's pretty pale. Um, and then the neck is pretty sort of overall kind of diffuse, I would say, as opposed to having a lot of contrast, like a common loon would have. What do you
Yeah,
think?
and overall, just really light on the neck entirely.
Yeah.
And the side view makes it really easy to see the curved lower surface of the bill as well, kind of curving up as it does toward the tip.
In contrast with the common loon up here, which is more straight, or I said dagger-like, and that recurvature on the mandible there. It's hard to see the auricular spot here, but there is a faint mark there evident. So that kind of sandy color. So great. So we've got all 4 species. There's our little summary of some of our points there for our video later. But let's continue on to our last let it fly slide here. We've got a couple of these have more than one bird. Well, let's start with number 1.
Yeah. So number one, the bird on the right kind of jumps out to me to start with. Um, I see it looks like a pretty hefty bill. It's got a pretty overall diffuse neck with no strong contrast, and it's kind of a pale, almost buffy color. Um, I'm gonna go with a yellow-billed loon for that one. What do you think, Pete?
Yep, totally agree with that. I see those armadillo stripes on the back with the kind of the scaly fringed feathers,
Yeah.
making those really distinct stripes. And then as I look over to the one on the left, boy, the light's a lot different on that one. But even though the bill is seems to be pointing toward the sun, it seems kind of dark.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, this one's
The
kind
back
of
is
hard
very
for
different
me.
too. It doesn't
The,
have that same scaling, which is an interesting comparison.
Maybe not as neat looking, but there's definitely a pattern happening there.
Yeah.
so I wouldn't be too surprised if the left one was a common. They're both basically the same size. Maybe the left one's a little smaller, but they're both big birds. And
Hmm.
really, it's just going to come down to kind of the details. And I kind of feel like I'm seeing a darker bill, darker head, and not quite as much of a distinctly striped back as I do on the right-hand bird.
The bill on the one on the left almost looks, it's with these photos and when you're out there and the water's moving and everything, it can be hard to tell, but the bottom of this of the bill of the bird on the left looks pretty flat as opposed to the like slightly rounded up curved to me. So I would I'd always with these birds I'd always want to watch them a little longer, but if I had to guess I'd go with common too.
Okay, so number one, common left, and yellow-billed on the right. How about number two?
What you think, Pete?
Well, we're only seeing the head here, but boy, just from that, I can tell that it is a much more dainty sort of structure. It doesn't have that big blocky head. The
Yeah.
bill is very fine, very delicate, relatively speaking. So, we're definitely, I think, looking at one of the smaller species here.
Yeah. Um, the lighting is kind of funky, but nothing jumps out to me on the neck of like in terms of contrast. I don't see a chin strap that would make it a Pacific loon if it had one.
No, and it's also kind of holding the bill, up a little bit,
Oh yeah.
which also points a bit more toward red-throated to me.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so number three, we're back to the two birds.
Yeah.
One question might be, are they the same or are they different species?
Boy, the heads on both of them just look so tan to me. Um,
Mhm.
the one on the right's got a little bit of that ear spot, the auricular spot. The other
Yeah.
one is just super light. The one on the left is just super light all the way across the head. The bills on both of them look to me to be pretty light uh,
Yeah.
and heavy. What else am I missing here?
Yeah. The one on the right has the really interesting has that like knobby almost forehead. Yeah. That really.
Kind of a classic look for yellow-billed, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so maybe the one number four might be the most challenging, but I think you can identify it. It
Ooh.
looks like it's preening. So one thing this calls up is all the loons have white underparts. We don't see the underparts very much on the birds when they're on the water, but when they're preening, they'll roll over. And so we're looking at the belly here of this particular loon, and it's got one of its legs sticking out at the surface there on the left, and it's busy preening the side of its breast.
Yeah. So that bill looks fairly thin to me. So I would put that in the camp of the Pacific or red-throated loons. I would expect a gray bill of a common loon to be a bit chunkier. What do you think, Pete?
Yeah, I mean that uh, I think it has its mouth open, right? So you're just kind of seeing you're only really seeing the top part of the bill, but it does look pretty fine. I'm looking for a chin strap that would, be kind of a confirmation for Pacific, which is not super obvious on this one. Um, I don't know. I'm kind of going back and forth on this one with
Mhm.
Pacific and maybe common. I see what
Okay.
potentially could be eye arcs, which would point toward common. Maybe there's a little bit of a backward facing white triangle, but with its head turned like that, uh, it's a little hard to be sure.
Tricky, yeah.
I would say there's definitely not a sort of a straight line effect, but there's something going on here, something projecting forward and something projecting backward. Um, but the angle makes it hard to discern what's going on. But I think you're on the right track there with the eye arcs and kind of a dark. Well, we can see if the head is fairly dark, so we don't think you kind of ruled out the red-throated loon. Maybe in a couple of regards, it would be more blended here. But there is something projecting back and something projecting forward. I think the bill shape and size are really hard to assess. What we're actually looking at, I think, is the bottom part of the lower mandible. There's the tomial line going out right there between the two parts of the bill, and we can't really see much of the upper part, upper bill,
Mm.
except that it's dark and it's a gray colored thing. So we can eliminate the yellow-billed loon based on the overall color and the grayish tone on the bill. And so we've eliminated yellow-billed and red-throated, I think, pretty well. But with the features that Pete noted here of the eye arcs is a good common loon mark, and that the neck is not really showing us that nice demarcation with kind of I think we would see a kind of probably curving because the bird's holding its head the way it is, but it would be a demarcation coming down along here instead of that backward projection. So this is a tricky angle, and of course, as you're watching it, it would preen like this for a few moments, and it would come back to some more normal view and be a little easier to assess. And but it is a common loon there in that number 4. So. I had to throw a tough one at you guys there since you were doing cleaning up on all the others. So great job. We're going to conclude here, and I want to say thank you to all of the photographers whose images were used for our bird bombs tonight. Can't do this without the bird pictures. So some great work here by a number of different photographers, and thank you many times for making your work available for bird bombs. Um, and hopefully I've credited the images correctly on all of the slides. And we can look ahead to the next bird bombs. I'm going to skip November, but come back in December, and we're going to do another in the habitat blast theme. But this is not such a clear-cut habitat idea. I'm thinking more about what are the birds that are, I say, in town here. So winter birds in town. So winter season. And then what are the birds associated with, say, our metro areas, which include a number of different habitats from urban and other developed type habitats to parks and river corridors or stream corridors and some lakes and ponds and things like that. So December 11th, Habitat Blast Winter Birds in Town. You can register for that now on the DFO page. Go to programs and events, and you can register now for that December bird bombs. So I'm going to stop screen share. We'll see if we have any questions. I want to thank Laura and Pete for your efforts and with the Let It Fly. Great job. Great to have you guys participating. So if there's any questions or comments, I can address those for a couple moments before we conclude.
Yeah, if you do have questions, please drop them in the Q&A, and I'm happy to grab those. I have a question for you. I'm curious, as these birds are sort of arriving, where should we be going to look for them?
Well, mostly it's the bigger bodies of water. The loons and scoters like to dive deep, and so they like the bigger waters that tend to be deeper. And so you'll find them at wherever those big reservoirs are. The grebes really pan out to be pretty similar. They're also looking for the bigger bodies of water. Um, And so any of the, just kind of look at the map and see where those are. And if you're following eBird, like so many birders are, you can see where people are finding things. So it's going to be places like Cherry Creek and Chatfield, Pueblo Reservoir, Big Johnson Reservoir down in El Paso County, places like Baseline, and some of the bigger reservoirs up. It's quite so many bodies of water up in Boulder and Larimer County. It's hard to choose from. And then out on the prairie, even there's some nice big reservoirs, places like Pruitt Reservoir. But one of the cool things about the loons and the scoters is that more often than not, they'll stick around for a little while. So most of them are not one day wonders, but they might be around for a number of days or even weeks. And as we get into the later part of the season, beginning into December, they may stick around until something freezes. So they may be there for, a month or more, or even into the winter at places like Pueblo Reservoir, or move to a spot that's not freezing. So that's kind of a neat thing. When they do turn up, you have a kind of a grace period to go out there and follow up and maybe be able to cross paths with some of these. Last winter was great at Cherry Creek. I think we had all four species of the loons all at the same time in December, right into the beginning of January, and then it froze and they went somewhere else. But sometimes it can be really rich that way.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about how loons in particular love to dive. Grebes as well, but the loons love to be on the surface, dive down, and they surface up again far away, right? So you're chasing them across the reservoir. Do you have any pro tips for how to refine that loon that keeps diving, long enough to get a look at it?
Um, I mean, sometimes you can even move to another part of the lake depending on what place it is and what access you have. I've done that where a loon has been on one side of Cherry Creek and I'll go around to the opposite side. And by which time, following law number two, it has moved back to my original side. But they do definitely, the loons in particular, more so than the scoters and the grebes, will cover ground underwater and come up in a different place. But often they have a trajectory and they're moving in a certain direction for some period of time. So it starts out over in that spot, goes under, and you see it come up 200 yards to the right. And then it's still going to continue to the right, maybe on its next dive and surface pattern. So you can
Nice.
kind of anticipate where it's likely to show up on the next time it comes up. And if it's diving, it may only be up for a number of seconds before it goes down again. So it helps if you can anticipate that trajectory and be looking where it's probably going to come up. It also helps if you're not by yourself and you have multiple sets of eyes that can focus in different directions um, or sample different parts of the lake. But it can be tricky to keep up with them for sure.
You mentioned, these loons, when they show up here, they tend to stick around for a few days, if not longer. Um, have you noticed any sort of pattern around like, are they always doing that active diving and feeding, or is there a certain time of day when maybe they're hanging out on the surface of the water more? Have you noticed anything like that?
Well, I think probably early in the day might be a time when there's more feeding than at other times of the day, but they'll also take advantage of what the fish are doing. The
Okay.
fish aren't always in the same place or the same depth, and you'll notice sometimes that especially in later December, we get a lot of mergansers on some of these lakes, and they're after the fish, and you'll see them all congregate in a certain area, and then they all move to another part of the lake, and they're tracking where the fish are available, and the loons are kind of doing the same things, and sometimes they'll be feeding according to what the activity of the prey is. And then if they've fed for a while and they've been successful, they're going to be more likely to have a little snooze or just hang out. So if they're not finding so much prey, they're probably trying to catch it more, for a greater period of
No,
time. So kind of
that
kind of
makes
think what the prey is doing is a part of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Paula asks, do the loons dive, do the different species of loons dive to different depths? Um, she's curious, for instance, what does the common loon eat with such a big bill? What does the yellow-billed loon eat with such a big bill compared to the Pacific or red-throated? Do you know?
So that's kind of a complex question and a complex answer that you'd want to consider different times of the year, different areas of the species range where they're living, but undoubtedly the different size bills play out into different species of fish or sizes of fish that the birds can handle and are going after. The loons are primarily going for fish, but they do eat other kinds of aquatic life as well. But I think here in Colorado, fish are the principal target for them. Some crayfish, but not so much of that, and not generally shellfish on the bottom, but fish that are swimming in the water column. And I think in Colorado they can all dive as deep as the water is.
Mm,
And so not really much of a difference there. I don't know exactly what differences there might be in potential diving depths. Some of these birds, their primary wintering areas are out on the ocean, where you're definitely dealing with a whole different situation where you have depths that are much greater and it probably plays out. I think generally speaking, the bigger birds dive deeper. It's probably how it plays out, and the bill sizes and things affects probably what size prey they're after when you average it all out.
makes sense. Cool. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in, so thanks, David.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys, Pete and Laura. Thanks a lot. And thanks everybody for tuning in. And we'll see you on next Bird Bombs come December 11th. Good night, everyone.